Dobrý deň, vážení priatelia. Vítam vás. Alebo najprv mi povedzte, či ma počujete, aspoň dajte niekto do chatu, či je ma počuť. Výborne, ďakujem pekne. Zvinka. Vítajte na 4. tzv. holandskom webinári alebo holandskom cyklistickom webinári, čo je séria online aktivít, ktorými sa snažíme na Slovensko aspoň takto virtuálne dostať holandské know-how, holandské skúsenosti z rozvoja aktívnej mobility, cyklistickej výstavby, alebo teda rozvoja cyklistickej dopravy. Moje meno je Jan Roháč, pracujem v nadácii Ecopolis, kde mám na starosti práve programy, ktoré sú zamerané na aktívnu mobilitu, na rozvoj cyklodopravy a cykloturistiky. Ospravedlňujem sa za nie celkom dobrý pohľad do kamery, pretože mi nefunguje moja hlavná kamera, tak musím používať z notebooku, takže máte iba taký maličký. Ale o nič neprichádzate, pravdu povediac. Tieto webináre organizujeme v spolupráci s holandskou ambasádou na Slovensku. Veľmi pekne ďakujeme za podporu, ktorú nám v tomto dávajú. Je to podpora nielen finančná, ale aj, povedal by som, kontextová, alebo taká rámcová. Pomáhajú nám aj so sprostredkovaním nájdenia expertov a podobne, to znamená, veľmi dobre to funguje. Ďalším zásadným partnerom je organizácia zvaná Dutch Cycling Embassy, čo je holandská organizácia, ktorá sa zameriava alebo zaoberá exportom holandského know-how alebo cyklistického know-how do sveta. A takisto podporilo túto sériu webinárov slovenský výrobca bicyklov CTM, asi ho všetci poznáte. Spoločnosť Bimission, ktorá dodáva na slovenský trh cyklistický mobiliár, a spoločnosť EcoCanter, ktorá dodáva ščítače chodcov a cyklistov. Dnešnými hostiami sú dvaja experti z Holandska, Viktor Mensing z firmy Studio Bereikbaar a Lior Steinberg z spoločnosti Humankind. Táto téma, ktorú budú prezentovať, je akýmsi, nechcem povedať, že vyvrcholením, ale je akýmsi zakončením prvej štvorice webinárov. Bude koncipovaná trošku širšie ako iba na cyklodopravu alebo na rozvoj bicyklovania. Je zameraná aj na taký širší kontext priestoru alebo uličného priestoru, skrátka ako vieme premeniť priestory, ktoré boli pôvodne pre autá, ako ich vieme premeniť na priestory pre ľudí. Čo je zaujímavé, tentokrát sa pozrieme aj mimo Holandsko prvýkrát, pretože Lior nám bude prezentovať jeden príklad z Tel Avivu, z Izraelu, čo je dobrý príklad, pretože to ukazuje, že holandskí experti sú schopní pracovať v zahraničí, čo teda je priama výzva pre vás, ktorí pracujete v slovenských mestách a regiónoch, že neváhajte a skúste ich vtiahnuť do svojich projektov vo svojich mestách. Holanďania nie sú zameraní samozrejme iba na Holandsko, ale tú skúsenosť sa snažia šíriť po celej Európe, a dokonca aj po celom svete. To je dosť z mojej strany. Dúfam, že som na nič týchto úvodných vecí nezabudol. Všetci máte vypnuté mikrofóny a kamery. To znamená, že akékoľvek otázky, prosím vás pekne, dávajte do kolónky alebo pod gombík Q&A, Questions and Answers. Nepoužívajte chat. A ak chcete počúvať ich prezentácie v origináli, tak si vypnite tlmočenie a dajte si off. Asi všetko. Ak sú nejaké otázky, tak môžete sa pýtať, ale ja by som teraz odovzdal slovo Viktorovi Mensingovi, ktorý oni budú mať zdieľanú prezentáciu a Viktor začne a potom bude pokračovať Lior, neviem, ako sa vyslovuje, a potom to opäť dokončí Viktor. Viktor povie také základné úvodné veci, také širší pohľad do problematiky a potom Lior Lior povie niekoľko, alebo ukáže niekoľko prípadových štúdií. Viktor môže zdieľať obrazovku a môžeme začať.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. I will start to share my screen. I think you can all see this, if I'm correct. I hear nobody complaining, so I guess you do. So today we will give a presentation about turning car-centered cities into human-centered cities. And I will be doing this together with Lior Steinberg, and Lior is from Humankind. The name is self-explanatory, I guess. They're about creating human and kind cities. So they focus on happy mobility, on active modes, and on planning for the next generation. And I myself, Victor Mensink, I work as a consultant in mobility for Studio Bereikbaar, which is a small Dutch company founded a few years ago. We have quickly become one of the main transport consultancies in the Netherlands. We focus on walking, cycling, public transport, urban planning, and public space, and so our team combines different backgrounds such as transport modeling, urban planning, architecture, and research, and more different components. And today we will talk about, first I will give a general introduction of what barriers there are in becoming a human-centered city. And then Lior will take over and talk about some case studies, so you can see what barriers have to be overcome and see the advantages of people, of places actually making this transition. So I'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to start about talking about the city. And why is this? Because we have seen that the level of urbanity of a city greatly influences the mobility pattern. And of course, there are the question is how does the city function? And of course, there are many components influencing how the city looks like, and external effects that go on, such as Corona. But the idea is that I think in general cities will adapt and overcome all such crises, and that is because of the way the city works. There's a concentration of people, of trade, of knowledge, of commerce, of social and cultural life, of educational opportunities. And so the city really has to provide for this. It has to have the flexibility to make people interact, to make people meet each other, to make people exchange ideas and knowledge. So this is the place where most money is made. And so this proximity of functions, this everything that is close by, really is an important part of how the city works. And accessibility is well, usually people think about we build a highway as fast as possible, and then we have a lot of accessibility. But accessibility is also a function of proximity, so of how close things are that you need, such as your job, your education, your friends, and everything else. So if you can get cities to connect with each other, you can create a agglomeration which is interesting for both companies to settle and for the people. So I talk about this a lot, about the cities. Why is that? Because the cities are, in general, they are growing. And of course there are different effects that are going on, but we see over time that cities have always had upturns and downturns. But now is the time that for the first time ever in history that more than half of the world's population lives in the city. And here we can see the graph of the population living in urban areas. And you see there's some difference between the Netherlands, which is the upper line, and Slovakia, the lower line. But the trend is upwards, and this is generally favorable for fostering strong and sustainable economies. And if we look at the line for the Netherlands, from the 1950s and 1960s, 1970s, there was this national policy of separation of functions and more urban sprawl, so spreading people and companies out across the country. And this belonged to the modernist view of how to approach a city, so people could work and live in different places. And really, the car made this possible. So there were longer distances to be overcome. But the car growth made this possible. So car became more affordable for everyone. But from the 2000s, we saw in the Netherlands a big growth in people coming towards the cities. And as we'll see later, this also meant a change in the mobility pattern. And this made a lot of changes possible within the cities. We see for Slovakia, it follows a different line. From the 90s, it's almost flat. But then in the future, the share of population living in urban areas is expected to grow again. And of course, the growing cities that comes with opportunities, but also with challenges. And one of those challenges is the space that is available. So inside cities, there's limited space available. But when there's more people going to be moving around. So there's more movements, and how can you facilitate that? But on the other hand, in the cities, the space can be used for much more than just transportation. There's this desire for attractive, lively, dynamic, green and clean places. And we can see that the influx of people to the cities is going on despite of the high cost of living in the city, in spite of the constraints in car accessibility of the cities. So this at least implies that car accessibility doesn't have the upper priority anymore. But besides the trend that more people are living in the cities, there's also other trends that are going on. For example, the sustainability. There's the Paris Agreement to try to stay below 2 degrees of higher temperature. And in the Netherlands, for example, about 15% of the CO2 emissions come from traffic. So there's a lot to be gained there. Then there's health. There's more people overweight than ever before. So how can you facilitate that people are moving are healthier than before? Then there's inclusiveness. So it's about the question of how to provide equal chances for everybody. So I think a lot of the uproar that is going on in the United States, for example, is because of there's not fair and equal chances for everybody, regardless of your race, or if you're rich, or if you're poor, or if you're disabled. So if everybody can get the possibility to be able to access, for example, the jobs they want, then there's a more chance of equal opportunities. And finally, the road safety. So still there's The traffic deaths are a large cause of deaths worldwide, and also in Slovakia, there's almost 300 deaths every year in traffic. So with all these trends, the transition in mobility is a very logical step. So if you can get people to get out of their car and go by bike, by foot, by public transport, they're all modes that are more efficient in space usage. They're also more sustainable, they're healthier, they're cheaper, they're more inclusive, and they help reduce road safety issues. And we can see that in the Netherlands, despite having a real national vision on how to tackle this, the transition is already in place. So you can see here the graph of car intensities inside a city, the lower one, the orange line, which is going down from the year 2000. This is for a small city in the south of the Netherlands. But there's a big difference between the car traffic inside cities and the car traffic outside of cities, which is the upper line. So the corridor, the highway has almost a 300% increase in car usage since the 1980s. And so the car remains an important mode for people, but it's not everything anymore, especially inside the cities. So this mobility transition, what does it look like? So I'm gonna explain this with an example. This is a picture of Rotterdam in 2003. So you can see the central station, the train and tram station, and the offices where I'm sitting and where Leo is normally sitting is also in this picture. And Rotterdam was constructed or reconstructed after the World War with this modernist view on the city, so high buildings, wide lanes for infrastructure, and they really started to struggle with this vision. So there was a lot of gray area in the city. For example, near the train station, it was designated almost only for mobility, so there was only trams and buses and parking lots and cars and trains. And it felt unsafe, not the entrance of the city you want to have. And so we skipped to 15 years later. And one of the things you see is that, well, the train station has a big building now, but it's become a much more attractive place. And you can see that, especially if you look at this picture, from a place to avoid because it was unsafe and there was problems with social issues. There were a lot of people, well, for example, gathering to do drugs around there, so it was unsafe. And now it has become a place to actually be, to stay, to meet people. It was a green place, and it is more connected with the buildings around it. And so we see that in many more places, that the revival of the public quality is there, to have the quality there to people to meet and to exchange on the street itself. So why can you not implement human-centered cities everywhere? What are the barriers that we walk into? Well, I think it's no coincidence that Rotterdam started with this place for their change, because we see a lot of synergy between urban planning, so land use, and cycling and public transport. So for the land use, if you develop space and build more houses or offices near a train station, then you really benefit from this connection of cities. And regarding the the public transport and the cycling, we see a lot of synergy between those as well, because the modes combined offer you a flexibility in door-to-door travel, such as which is what is possible by car, but also the high speed that because of the train that a car usually offers. So the two of them combined really gives them a competitive advantage over the car. And there are a couple of mechanisms in place that reinforce these synergies. So if you focus more on the bike, then you get larger catchment areas. So the train station becomes more accessible for people in the city. You can have more choices, so you can choose to cycle to station A or to cycle to station B, which is a different line, which may be faster for you. So there's an increased market for the public transport. There's increased liveliness of the public space, and a more land use to support the agglomeration forces within the city. How can you benefit from this the most is to align these three things: the land use, the public transport, and the cycling. And so one advice is to, well, if there's limited funds or power to then to focus on one place rather than to distribute all the efforts. And to also think about the required subsystems. So in the Netherlands, we have huge bicycle parking systems next to the station, but also in other places where you want people to get off their bike and to enjoy the street or connect their journey to the different place by public transport. And we can see that you can get this loop going on. So if you get bigger cities, you have more urbanization, you have more proximity, there's more functions close by. So this supports more services. For example, shops have a more potential customers, or public transport line can be run with profits. So there can be more of this, and this leads that more people can make choices and have interactions, and more people want to live in the city. So you get this positive loop where everybody, in the end, turns out for the better. This is what a mobility transition looks like for the 4 major Dutch cities. On the left hand, we see the figure for around 2006, and the right hand upper is for about 10 years later. And the vertical axis is about the distance classes, whereas the horizontal axis is about the mode. So we can see here that a lot has changed in those 10 years. So there's more trips going on in less than 2.5 kilometers. So this is because of the functions getting closer by. You don't need to travel much anymore because, for example, your job can be nearby, or the supermarket is nearby. And so more people can also walk or go by bike, and also the public transport has gotten a big lift. And usually what the focus of the discussion is about the larger distance trips. So say from 10 kilometers and onwards, that are during traffic hours on the highway. So which is basically the right lower part of this graph. And that's about the traffic jams, which is only a very small portion of the mobility of people, but it's a very high portion of what the debate on mobility is about. And in regards to the 4 big cities, to put that into perspective, there's also this same figure, but then for a smaller city, which is not so successful in aligning the land use and public transport and cycling. And there you see a really big different pattern in mobility. So one final barrier I would like to discuss is the different stakeholders. So we all know if you're designing a street, there's a few stakeholders that are active. For example, the cars, they want to drive fast through the streets. There's the fire department, the police that are they want to go fast. There could be tram lines or bus lines. And so these are all functions that pass through a certain street, but don't really add value to the place. And what we have noticed, if you ask the people themselves what they want, so not only the people that tend to talk loud, but also the others, then you get a really different idea about what they actually think is important. So they have very refreshing ideas to put into the general perspective of how to make a certain street. And those are obviously the people that actually add value to the place. So we've seen that usually they don't really mind to give up a parking spot in front of their house if there's some nice green, for example, in return. Or they don't mind if you have to drive slower if that makes the safety better. And so the advice is to also take this majority, the majority, maybe you don't hear them necessarily, but also take them into account. And to first determine the values you want to put in the street, and then let the experts design the streets. Then this is my part of the presentation, and I will ask Lear to share his screen and take it further from here. Lear, you're still on mute.
How is it working now?
It works, but it's not full screen yet.
Is it now?
Yes, now it works. Thank you.
Thanks. So Victor, first, thanks for the introduction. And I think it's the last sentence that you've said before you said that I'm not on full screen was that first think about the values and not about, and then let the professionals design. And I think this picture that I have here can connect us to this question of values on this opportunity that we had last year, or a challenge that we face in the world, but gave us the opportunity to discuss values. So I put this picture of balconies, and I think that we all experienced it when we last year all had to go stay at home and look outside, not allowed to go out, hardly allowed to go to work. And I think that many people, and finally not only urban planners and politicians, but also just normal people that normally go to work and need to use their car, were sitting in their balconies and looking outside and realizing that our streets are not really designed for people to stay in. I myself in Rotterdam discovered a secret garden outside my house, where I was able to sit and relax, and even during the hot summer I could stay there and enjoy nicer weather. And I think that I'd really like to have the opportunity to really think about how we use this crisis to foster change, because it was already clear by then that we will be able to find the vaccination. Some countries are faster, some are less. But the problem is that we keep designing our cities in the wrong way. And when I was sitting in that garden, I read a beautiful book. And this quote I found really lovely. So unfortunately, I cannot say it in Slovak, but basically the only thing that the difference between humans and animals is that we are building our own zoos for ourselves. And yet, although we as animals, as humans, are always attracted, as Victor mentioned, if you will ask person to change a car place to a green place, there is a chance that they will agree. We still end up designing more and more places that look like the left side. And I've been to Bratislava, and it was lovely, but most of the lovely places that in Bratislava were built before car was invented. And since it was invented, also Bratislava, just like Rotterdam for many years, and other cities, Tel Aviv as well, that I'm sitting in, as building more and more things that look like on the left side. Before going to the case studies and examples of how we do the change, I want to give you an example from the Netherlands of how difficult it is to convince. So Victor mentioned, hey, if we will just offer people green, they might say, okay, you can remove a parking space or driving space. But Victor as well, and we all know that it's very, very difficult, especially if you ask the wrong people the wrong questions. So here is an example for asking the wrong question. This is a picture from Groningen. It is a city in north the Netherlands, 200,000 people. And this is a picture of the main park in the city. And this park used to look in the past like that. And the city in the 90s already gone under the change to become a more bicycle friendly. It's already been 20 years of changes in the city. And they wanted to turn this road that used to be park in the very past back into a park. And they said, yeah, let's do a referendum. Let's ask people what they want, because that's the best way of participation. So one option was to keep it like a road, and the other option was to turn it into a beautiful park. And the results of this referendum in the early 90s was that only 51% wanted to turn it into a park. Luckily, it was 2% more than the people that wanted to keep it as a road. And this is how it looks now. Now it's one of the busiest bicycle routes in the Netherlands. It is a loved park in Groningen. There are songs about it. All the students are meeting there every day. And I think that if you will ask people nowadays if they would like to turn off the park and make it a road, 99% will prefer to keep it as a park, which is a great thing because it shows that success convinces people and mostly they know what is the better situation. But it's also a terrible result because it shows that when you ask people the wrong question and you talk about mobility instead of talking about values, you ask them just about what is going to get worse for them. So you ask them, do you want us to remove the road? What they're thinking about is, oh, we're going to have more traffic jams. They don't think about all the benefits that are going to come. And in the examples I will show you, I will try to show you how we try to combine those mobility aspects to other values in urban life. What I try, or the model that we try to work through in those interventions of street transformation, is the Agile Urbanism brought from the startup world. Basically, the slow graduation, working with sprints toward a vision. And this is the urban strategy, is basically understanding that it's very difficult to make all the changes in one time, and that's why we need to choose. Just like the example from Rotterdam, where we want to invest our efforts and to do there the best change. And then when this creates a change, like the station in Rotterdam, build upon that change. And it can start from very small changes, and it can go through grand projects like closing off completely the city for cars, or building an all new train station with a metro line, etc. So the first project I want to present started during the Corona crisis, but will continue beyond, I hope. And it is called Vacation Streets. And it started when we realized that this year we are not going, or last year we were not going to go to vacation. And we thought, why wouldn't we offer people to take a vacation in their city? And using that vacations, we will be able to show the value of streets and the potentials our streets have. Why do we need to take the car or the plane all the way to Spain to enjoy great public space if we can create it in the Netherlands? And we did it. I mean, it was difficult and we had to close roads, but basically we closed several roads in Rotterdam, and we did it together with the community. And in some places it was a poorer community or richer community. But the great thing about this project is that it was funded by the mobility department. But if you look at the pictures, it has nothing to do with mobility. It has to do something with public space. On the background of the project, we also analyzed what happens when you close those roads. So everybody is so afraid when you tell them that you will remove all the parking spaces and you will close the road. But if you just present it as a festival, and then on the background, you also check what actually happened to the mobility, you might receive very surprising results. Sometimes closing a street doesn't affect anything about the mobility. It's just that we are afraid of it. Of course, it wasn't easy. And there were a lot of angry people. But what was beautiful about this project is that we had this crisis that we could use. So I think that the Corona, in that sense, helped us to convince decision makers to just say, okay, we're doing it because this year it's important. Another beautiful thing was that it brought people together. I mean, they were building it, and it also brought neighbors to discuss topics like parking and places for children to play, which is very difficult discussions to have just in the normal life where everybody busy on their own life. It was also in this street, some kids in the more poorer streets of Slovakia told me that it is the first vacation that they had in their life. So I think that even if you don't care about removing cars, I think it's important to have those things in your city, and of course always connect it to mobility. But now I will take you to let's say more of a mobility and more permanent intervention. So we've been part of the biggest bicycle strategy plan of active mobility in Israel. This is the Tel Aviv strategy for cycling. We're talking about over 300 kilometer of bike lane. So currently the city has 100 kilometer, and we want to get to 300 kilometer in 6 years. So we created the strategy, but it's very difficult because what happens if you look on the left side, you see the current situation. So we have those very narrow roads with 2 parking spaces on 2 sides. And in order to be able to apply this new network, we need to remove parking space in one side. So you see on the right side a picture that we made for the strategy. And this is very difficult. I think that if you work for a city hall, the thing that you are afraid the most is to tell neighbors that you are going to remove their parking space. And what we've done is, or the city has done, is deciding not to wait, but actually starting implementing using tactical urbanism. So the city during the Corona time and still now has been just removing parking space on the left side and just putting bi-directional bike lanes. I don't think they are perfect, and they are absolutely not the best way we need to create in the future the bicycle network. But there is something very beautiful about them, and it is that you can come in the middle of the night, take off the parking, put a bicycle lane. It is not perfect, but it's the beginning. And in the coming years, when you have more budget and more time, you can reshape the street and make it in a perfect situation. But this is difficult because what happens when you install a bicycle lane is that you have in the morning after that, you have a big traffic jam, and a lot of people are angry that the street is empty There is no bicycle people using it. There are no cyclists using it, and you just took space for cars. And I think that for that, you need a bit more of a vision. The change should not only be about cycling. I will give you an example. So this is another street in Tel Aviv. It's a beautiful square, or used to be a beautiful square, that turned into a parking lot, unfortunately. And what the city did is they decided in June, a year ago, that they want to close it for cars to allow the cafes to have more space because of the corona. They can go outside. So they just close it off. They just put those bollards in the entrance to the street. And people were very angry because, first of all, you took a lot of space for cars. And second of all, the cafes still stayed in the same place. And we discussed with the city what we can do about it. And they asked us, how can we save this square? Because if we don't find a solution, we will need to let the cars back. So the first thing we did is that we said, okay, we have the carrot and the stick method. You already use the stick. You don't allow people to park here. Now you need to use the carrot. Show them what are the benefits of this place. And definitely, if you keep the place still with all those bollards that are blocking the road, it is not becoming a square. So we created within 1 week, we created, including citizen participation with residents, we created this sketch. We showed it to the cafes, to the residents in the area. They loved it. And actually, within 1 month, we managed to turn this place from a parking space into a place for people to sit, play, and enjoy. Actually, this place during the Corona crisis looked more like a party, which was maybe not very good for the Corona crisis, but was nice because people had the places to go out. The cafes loved it because people were able to get coffee takeaway and just sit outside. And the protest of neighbors against the removal of parking spaces is gone because they cannot compete with those pictures. I have a video that shows how it looked. If someone, I'm starting it, but if it doesn't work well, please let me know because maybe the internet is not good enough. Video, and I hope it was going fine. It says, see you in the square, let's say, or in the pedestrian street. And I think that this video produced by the municipality is one of the most important steps. It is showing that the discussion should stop being about parking and it should start being about places to be in. I think that's the way we need to go. And I suggest that we also, when we are doing those changes, we will save a little bit more budget to celebrate them. Because currently, if we take spaces for cars, most of the news stories and the media and the protests and the Facebook groups are full of people that are angry. People that enjoy don't go to Facebook to say that they enjoy a place. And this is what we as planners and when we design the process to make a street change, we need to document and present to the public the success. I'm going next. Lastly, to the modular parklet example. I hope that I still have 5 to 7 minutes. Please, you can stop me if I talk too much. But the parklet, the modular parklet, is this idea of replacing parking spaces, and I think this is again the most difficult issue. You propose, you see that there is not enough space in the street and you want to add something else, so you replace parking spaces with places to be. It's called parklet. It was invented in San Francisco, if I can recall, but it's been used all over the world. And the idea is to work together with the residents and the citizens and the shop owners and ask them, what do you want instead of parking space? Because we decided to remove parking space and we want to give you something back. And you customize it for them. And sometimes they also build it or take care of it. So this is a project that we've been doing in Rotterdam, where we took 4 parking spaces, and it worked well. It was there for 2 years, and it was full of bikes. This is on the morning that we built it, on the evening that we built it. But it is very expensive and very difficult to work with. So the idea is not to just put it there and go away. The idea, in my opinion, is that if it is successful, you need to turn the change to a permanent situation. Otherwise, you just waste a lot of energy. And Rotterdam has this module, this solution that was invented by the municipality. It's called Fietsvlonder or bicycle platform, or maybe Victor has a better name for it in English, but it's bicycle platform. The idea is that the city sees that there are problems of a lot of bicycles parking on the sidewalk, so they remove here's a comics showing how it works. They basically take away a car space, they put this platform, then they measure how successful it is and if enough people are using it. And then in the step 4, they turn it into a permanent situation and they take the platform to another place. So this is a transition methodology of changing many spaces while testing it. So if it doesn't work, you don't need to make people angry, you just move it to another place. And if it works, it proved itself already. What we created with Rotterdam was the modular parklet. And this modular parklet brings this idea of the bicycle platform, but to more elements. So the idea is that every neighborhood will be able to, like Lego, build their own modular parklet. And the idea also to make it cheap and very flexible. So this was our first parklet, and it worked pretty well. People were happy about it, so we created more modules for those parklets. This one we plan to put in front of a street, in front of a school, so you will have space to park your bicycle. We also add one during the Pride week in Rotterdam, in front of a gay bar. So it's very customizable to every event. So that worked quite well. I will skip this video to go to Victor last slides, but basically I think just to finish off, the idea of all those examples is to show that you can stop talking maybe about mobility in the way of removing cars or putting cars, and try to celebrate more the public life that you can create if you remove car infrastructure. Hey Victor, I'm moving to your slide. Just let me know what to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to continue with that message. Your last sentence. So as we have seen, there's limited space available in the cities, and there's a lot of debate going on about how to use the space. And what we have seen is if you do not allocate space for something, it does not happen. And also remember what I said earlier in the presentation, what the cities are about. So they're about exchanging ideas, meeting people, being able to claim your own space, also about relaxing. So that you also need space for that. And so my 2 cases that I would like to present now, they're about this phenomenon. So that a street is about much more than just transportation, and the street can also be to support the public qualities, to support the quality of life in the city. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So it's about my the first case, which is in Haarlem. It's a city close to Amsterdam, and they have this road there, which in 2008, the upper picture was used just for transportation. So you see, it's very gray, a lot of asphalt. There's cars everywhere. The bicycle has some space, but doesn't really feel safe. And there's also parking on the side of the road. And so this road was used for a lot of going, not staying, but going, and going to the train station that was a bit further down this road. And the street was connecting basically the train station to the city center. But what you don't really see there is that the street has quite a lot to offer. It's actually a really nice place. And so they decided to make a transformation. And the key was because of the safety issues of people just going through the street. But of course, in many streets, you see this phenomenon where if you can't go through a street anymore, then people will start to worry. So where do your cars go? They say car traffic is like a river. So there's water flowing. If you stop the water, it's going to flow somewhere else. So how is that place going to look like? I think there's some difference between car traffic and the river. For example, if you dig out a river and make it deeper, then the water, there's not more water coming in. And so, but you also have to look at the bigger level of the network scale. So in 2020, this the change has completed for quite some years. So the lower picture, and where you see where it used to be a very gray street, now it is become the domain of cyclists and pedestrians. And the interesting thing about this street is that now actually it is focused much more on the quality of staying there. So you see where maybe there used to be some shop owners that were against this plans because they lost potential customers that could park in front of their door. But instead, so many other shops opened because it now is a nice place where people would like to stay and where they pass through and they spend time. And so you see, for example, there's a bar opening up on the right side, and there's a lot more shops going on. There's people claiming their space, adding green to the streets, adding chairs, nice other places to just to make their stay possible. And something similar you can see in the next slide, which is in Delft, where they had this, a lot of the street was allocated for transportation. So you see the tram lines, next to that there's a bridge, which is the train. Right now you're standing on the car lane, and there's some cycling, and there's parking in next to the street. But the city center of Delft then became more car free. So where it's a nice historical center, and I think in the 60s and 70s it was still possible to park your car right on the nice looking main square, but they generally removed cars outside of the city center. And of course, if you look at, for example, traffic models, then they say, well, they predict, well, they're going to drive somewhere else. But this is really about the difference between what we see going on with this mobility transition and what was predicted. None of it's predicted. And you see in 2009, it used to be a dirty street. There is just garbage everywhere. There's graffiti. It feels unsafe. You just want to pass by there as quickly as possible. But in 2020, the picture below, you see there's a lot of change. It's become a nice place to stay. So there's shops and restaurants opening there. There's bars, and it's a place to, well, it's much more than just going from A to B. And so that's where I would like to end this presentation. So the bottom line is, there's so much more going on in streets than just mobility. And if you want that happening, the quality of public life enhanced, then you really need to allocate the space for that. So with that, I would like to end this presentation. Thank you for listening. And I think it's now time for the part to answer the questions.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne obidvom. Je to veľmi zaujímavé, osobitne napríklad pre mňa, pretože v roku 2019 som strávil pár týždní práve v tom meste Delft a je to neuveriteľné, aké je to mesto pre ľudí. Ako aut je tam stále veľa, to je o tom. Holanďania majú oveľa vyššiu motorizáciu, ako máme na Slovensku, takže aut je veľa. Ale tie ulice, to centrum je skutočne rešpektuje to, čo chcú ľudia, a nie to, čo chcú auta. Naozaj to je skvelý príklad a je to krásne, prekrásne mesto. Chcem len ospravedlniť trošku tú technickú kvalitu. My sme použili teraz prvýkrát Google Slides a bolo vidno, že Lior je na slabšom internete, to znamená, bolo to trošku kockaté a nebolo to celkom dobré, ale kvalitná prezentácia bude zavesená na stránke, ktorú sme uvádzali, to znamená na cyklobáze, kde bude aj video z tohto webinára. Takže potom si budete môcť pripomenúť tie slajdy ešte raz v dobrej kvalite, keď si ich stiahnete. Máme nejaké otázky. Najprv, jednak došli nejaké otázky vopred a povie ich neskôr moja kolegyňa Andrea Štulajterová, ktorú som zabudol predstaviť, ale je dušou tejto aktivity z občianskej cykloiniciatívy Banská Bystrica a čaká na svoju príležitosť, aby mohla sa spýtať niekoľko otázok, ktoré od vás dostala. Ale máme tu aj aktuálne otázky od účastníkov, takže ja by som to skúsil najprv. Lesia sa pýta, je to aj po anglicky, takže môže si to prečítať, ale pýta sa, ako dlho trvá Lior, otázka je pre Liora, ako dlho trvala príprava tých prázdninových ulic a koľko ľudí bolo do toho vtiahnutých a možno, že pár slov o údržbe tých parkletov, to znamená, kto to polieva, či to vyžaduje nejakú údržbu a podobne.
I'm sorry for the connection. I hope you could hear the examples, but can you hear me now? Is it working well? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So the vacation street, it took around 1.5 months of preparation involving a group of around 8 people and neighbors that volunteered. So it should not be very complicated if you just need 2 fences to close the street, if you get the legal rights. But you do need to have good connections with neighbors. So it works well if your organization or your city already is connected to some neighbors that are very active, and you just make sure that the legal framework is working. Regarding the parklets, we make sure always to put it where they have a father or a mother, meaning that there is a resident or a shop owner that promises to water them. And the reason is that they win something, they get something in front of their house, and they also need to give something back to the city. And I think that watering the plants is a very small request from someone who getting such a lovely space. There was a question about models. We are going to share the drawings as an open source project in the coming weeks. So the drawings and the technical details of the parklet will be free to use for every city or company.
Miro sa hneď pýta, predpokladám, že Miro z Ružomberku, kde parkujú rezidenti, ktorí bývajú v centre mesta a tie parklety im zrušia, alebo teda všeobecne sa im zrušia parkovacie miesta, keďže sa tá ulica premení na ulicu pre ľudí. Dostanú nejakú inú alternatívu?
Yeah, what we did is that together with the municipality, we wanted to show them that they can live a life without a car in front of their house. And what we did is that we gave them a free parking space in a garage outside the neighborhood, which is a much better module in which you leave the car a bit outside the city center, and only when you use it, you go there. And it worked well for a few months.
A s tým súvisí aj otázka od Richarda Strenčína, či sa vôbec v Holandsku, či sa plánujú štvrte bez aut. Poznáme takú štvrť napríklad z Viedne, ale či sa plánujú, alebo či sa pripravujú štvrte pre ľudí, ktorí nemajú ani nechcú mať auto, využívajú car sharing, alebo skrátka sa pohybujú iba na bicykli a tým pádom nepotrebujú parkovacie miesta. Na Slovensku je to problém, pretože legislatíva prikazuje ku každému bývaniu aj parkovacie miesta. Ako je to v Holandsku?
Victor, you want to take it?
Yeah, I can answer that, at least partially. So I think that the first question is regarding the planning, and if you build, say, a new town or part of a town, how do you do that with the parking? And so I think this has the strong connection to the land use, what I have talked about earlier. So in general, in the Netherlands, where there are new houses coming, it's being made in close proximity to, for example, train stations. And so that means it's in a highly urban environment. And so people in general, they have a lot different mobility pattern than if you would build something in more rural areas. And so therefore the new buildings, they do still have, usually it's mandatory because of how municipalities have laws. So they do have a minimum of the number of cars that need to be parked per building, number of parking spaces. But we see that in general, if you, for example, there's a new neighborhood being built right outside of Amsterdam, and they use parking requirements of 0.2 cars. There have to be at least planned for parking lots. 0.2 parking lots have to be for every house that is being built. And so this is a much lower number than what it used to be or what it is in other cities. And you see that this attracts people that are willing to have this a nice neighborhood with more space for green and for relaxing, for example. And so they already have a mobility pattern which is more focused on the bicycle in the combination with public transport.
Ďakujem pekne. Andrea, máš tam niečo teda?
Ďakujem pekne za slovo. Áno, prišlo nám pár otázok aj mailom. Možno niektoré už boli čiastočne zodpovedané, ale prečítami. Prevádzky ako obchody, reštaurácie, kaviárne na obchodnej ulici majú obavu, že vylúčením motorovej dopravy im klesnú tržby. Majú sa čoho obávať, alebo naopak?
I can say that if you're a cafe owner in the city center and you think you will make less money, you are a very, very bad business person. I've never seen a city center cafe that has a bigger terrace and less car traffic and makes less money. From our interventions, we also see always that there is this places that are afraid, and it is just incredible how in 100% of the cases they suffer. I do have to say, not being too romantic here, is that there are businesses that will suffer. A furniture business in the city center that is used to have people coming with a car and taking the furniture will need to adapt. The question is if we as the policymakers want to let few businesses decide how the entire city should look like. But in general, in terms of activity and business, I think that cities like Amsterdam show that without very much, or Delft, without very much car traffic, you can have very good business.
Aďa?
Áno, ďakujem. Vidím ešte jednu otázku aj v našich otázkach, tak môžeme aj tu ešte skúsiť.
Zatiaľ choď ty, lebo toto už taká minúta.
Dobre. Je tu taká zaujímavá otázka. Čo je podľa vás efektívnejšie? Ako primátor mesta klásť dôraz na budovanie bezpečnej infraštruktúry pre peších a cyklistov, alebo investovať viac do zvyšovania povedomia a vzdelávania obyvateľov o tom, že menej aut v meste je pre nich lepšie, zdravšie. Otázka je hmota alebo povedomie a vzdelanie.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tough and tricky question. I think, of course, educating people in how they could use the mobility is nice, but you always have to think about why would people do this, and if there's no infrastructure prepared for, say, walking or cycling, and it feels unsafe, then you can tell people that it's better for everybody if they still take their bike, but they're not going to do this. So I think it's always hand in hand, the development of the infrastructure that is needed for staying inside a public space for walking and for cycling, and the changing of people's minds, of their culture, to actually use this.
Aďa, stále ideš ty?
Mám tu jednu takú aktuálnu otázku. Dnes v Španielsku plošne bola znížená rýchlosť v mestách na 30 km za hodinu. Myslíte si, alebo vaše skúsenosti sú také, že toto opatrenie, znižovanie rýchlosti v niektorých uliciach v mestách, zvyšujú ako keby okrem tej bezpečnosti aj počet ľudí, ktorí teda chodia viacej peši, alebo zvyšuje sa podiel cyklistickej a pešej dopravy podľa vás priamo úmerne k tomuto opatreniu?
Yes, for sure. I think this is a very relevant topic in the Netherlands as well, and we have seen that the epidemic has caused more and more cities to actually talk about this topic. Many cities are discussing, shouldn't we lower the speeds to 30 kilometers an hour for cars? And I think it's a nice momentum there that can be used, because this affects quite many of the aspects we have discussed. So, for example, when allocating space, which there's not a lot of space available in the cities, for cars going 50 kilometers an hour, you need wider lanes. So more space for cars, and also crossing the street is more difficult. So if you are able to go back to 30 kilometers an hour, then you gain space. For example, you can have cars sharing their lanes with cyclists. And in most places where this is done, if the car intensities are low enough, this also means that the roads are safer in general. And also it makes this the staying, the relaxing, the meeting in places more relaxed, because there's, for example, less sound, less pollution from the cars. So if you're able to lower the speeds to 30, and this is a very powerful button to use, a very powerful option in order to create more human-centered cities.
I just want to add to what Victor said. I agree with everything, but just to be realistic, besides the legal, very, very difficult process that also Spain has been through, it is not just easy. It's not just as simple as changing the sign on the entrance to the road. It was in the answer of Victor. We need to change the geometry. We are selling cars that can get to 100 kilometers per hour very easily. And it's a very difficult request to ask someone to drive slow if it's very easy to drive fast. And in order to limit the speed, we need to limit the physical option to get to a fast speed, which means to change the geometry of street and make them narrow and not straight.
Ja iba vysvetlím, čo sa Andrea pýtala. Zatiaľ, čo doteraz bolo skutočne v mnohých európskych mestách, sa samospráva rozhodla obmedziť rýchlosť na 30-ku. Naposledy napríklad masívne Brusel pred pár mesiacmi. V Bruseli vlastne všetky vedľajšie cesty, všetky vedľajšie ulice, okrem hlavných, už majú povinne 30-ku. Tak v Španielsku, ak sa nemýlim teraz od pondelka, v Španielsku platí...
Práve od dnes.
Alebo od dnes platí nová legislatíva, kde je vlastne v zákone dané. To znamená, nie je to rozhodnutie samosprávy, ale je to ako keby nový zákon o cestnej premávke hovorí, že v obci je až na výnimky, tam, kde sú iba dva pruhy, tak tam musí byť, alebo tam je obmedzená rýchlosť na 30. Je to prvá taká legislatíva v Európe a uvidíme, ja som si istý, že sa to ujme a bude to rásť, aj keď si to asi na Slovensku nevieme predstaviť. Andrea, máme asi čas na poslednú otázku, ak tam ešte máš.
Je taká všeobecná, ale teda prečítam ju. V našej krajine je auto symbolom voľnosti, nezávislosti, dokonca postavenia v spoločnosti. Kde a čím začať, aby sa táto paradigma začala spochybňovať?
I can start quickly, Victor. I want to say that in every country, car is a symbol. I think it is. I heard it in absolutely every city I've been to, in every country, and I think that it's also very insulting to say about Slovakia that this is a symbol. I mean, Slovakia has been. Bratislava is much older than the car, and many Slovak cities are much older than the car. So I think that also in Slovakia, you see that younger people look for car-less life, which means that there is sort of a fashion to live around the bicycle and have more relaxed life and move to the city center. And I think we can take advantage of it, that the trend is going there.
Victor, no answer?
Yeah, yes, I could add to that. Yeah, indeed, in many places, and also here in the Netherlands, the car, of course, is a symbol of success because, well, you've been able to afford a car. And what we have seen here is that, well, the car usage has increased significantly in the 60s and 70s, for example, and then the car became a more widespread phenomena because more people could afford it. And then back then the idea was that everybody should have a car, and then everything is accessible. But then what we've seen here is that the bicycle actually acted as a counterpart to this car, and the Netherlands has had a struggle itself as well on how to tackle this problem on the large scale, because the car was there, it was big, it was a symbol, and there a lot of battles have been fought to get this Dutch bicycle culture we have now to get this so far. And part of the success, I think, is related to what people thought of the bicycle. So we see that a bicycle is actually in the Netherlands. It's also well, it has been a strong symbol of independence as well, because everybody could do it. I mean, women can ride a bicycle. Immigrants are being taught how to ride a bicycle, and so therefore it is, well, at least as big of a status the bicycle has as the car.
Ďakujem pekne. Ja k tomu pridám svoj postreh, využijem právo moderátora. Ono zrejme zatiaľ asi nejako rýchlo nedosiahneme zníženie počtu aut. Konec koncom Holandsko, ako som už spomínal, je oveľa viac motorizovanejšie. Je tam oveľa viac aut na obyvateľa ako na Slovensku. Dôležité je poskytnúť obyvateľom možnosť, aby auto nemuseli použiť. Nech ho majú, nech niekde je, ale tam, kde sa dá ísť peši, tak aby bolo pre nich bezpečné ísť peši, na bicykli, aby bolo jednoduché ísť na bicykli, a hromadnou dopravou, aby bolo jednoduché ísť hromadnou dopravou. až tam, kde sa nedá ísť jedným z týchto troch módov, tak aby až potom vytiahli auto. Hej, to znamená, určite nemôžeme chcieť od ľudí, aby chodili do IKEA nakupovať na bicykli, aj keď aj to Holandsko funguje, ale zase musíme sa snažiť, aby nemuseli chodiť napríklad do práce autom a poskytnúť im tie možnosti. Dobre, dovolím si to ukončiť. Ďakujem veľmi pekne našim dvom lektorom. Ešte raz pripomeniem, jedným bol Viktor Mensing zo spoločnosti Studio Bereikbaar a druhým bol Lior Steinberg zo spoločnosti Humankind. Zároveň je toto posledný webinár z takých, ktoré sme zatiaľ mali rozbehnuté. Ak si spomínate, tí trvalejší účastníci, začali sme niekedy, myslím, na konci februára, keď bol webinár o tom, ako získať podporu pre rozvoj cyklodopravy. Potom sme mali webinár o tom, ako získať priestor pre cyklistickú dopravu v meste. Potom sme mali webinár o tom, ako vytvoriť dobré a kvalitné parkovanie a dneska pre bicykle. A dnes to bolo také trošku širšie, ako zmeniť trošku tie priestory pre ľudí a nie pre autá. My pripravujeme ako Ecopolis v spolupráci s občianskou cykloiniciatívou, pripravujeme aj ďalšie pokračovanie webinárov. Sú trošku závislé samozrejme na finančnej podpore, ale chceli by sme od vás, keby ste nám na tú adresu, kde ste sa prihlásili, to znamená cyklo@ecopolis.sk, keby ste nám poslali svoju spätnú väzbu, či je to potrebné, či to považujete za užitočné a či má zmysel, aby sme sa týmto smerom ďalej uberali. Pretože ak to zmysel nemá, tak môžeme energiu využiť inak a ak to zmysel má, tak toto je naozaj dobrý spôsob, ako tie skúsenosti z cyklisticky rozvinutej krajiny dostať na Slovensko a radi by sme v tom pokračovali. Ale budeme radi, ak nám napíšete, keď nám aspoň 20 ľudí napíše, že to malo zmysel, tak si myslím, že určite budeme vedieť pokračovať v tejto sérii. Na záver by som chcel poďakovať za podporu. Ešte raz spomeniem všetkých podporovateľov, pretože je to dôležité. Chcel by som poďakovať za podporu na prvom rade teda holandskej ambasáde, ktorá nám v tomto veľmi pomohla a aj to človeka tak povzbudí, keď je taký záujem o našu prácu a zároveň aj združeniu Dutch Cycling Embassy, čo je holandská cyklistická ambasáda, ktorá nám pomohla identifikovať tých najlepších ľudí. Myslím si, že aj dneska to bolo zaujímavé, aj keď už to bolo trošku širšie. A zároveň podporovateľom, ktorým je výrobca bicyklov CTM Slovensko, a tiež Bimission, ktorý dodáva stojany, parkovacie boxy a podobne, a EcoCanter, ktorý dodáva ščítače cyklistov a chodcov. Prezentáciu nájdete na tej stránke Cykloplatforma a tam nájdete aj prezentácie zo všetkých predchádzajúcich seminárov. Nebude to asi dneska, pretože trošku nestíhame, ale v priebehu tohto týždňa, možno, že už zajtra, možno, že už dneska večer to tam bude. A takisto tam bude video. Video však bude iba bez prekladu. To znamená, Zoom nevie nahrávať zatiaľ preklad, takže iba tí, ktorí máte angličtinu. Ale vidím, že tu máme... Dobre, to znamená, že bude tam iba v originálnom jazyku. Myslím, že som už na nič nezabudol. Ďakujem aj Nadežde Rozhodovej za ďalší dobrý výkon. Dúfam, že sme v nej získali dobrú prekladateľku na akékoľvek témy, ktoré sa týkajú cyklistickej dopravy a aktívnej mobility. A prajem vám všetkým príjemné popoludnie a poďme rozmýšľať spolu v našich mestách, v našich regiónoch, ako menej používať auta a viac používať nohy a možno, že hlavne a najmä mozog. Ďakujem pekne, majte príjemné popoludnie.